As I stepped through the door of my son Jake's home that Christmas evening, a mix of anticipation and dread danced in my chest. The familiar warmth of the holiday was overshadowed by an unspoken bitterness that had been growing like strangling ivy over the years. The house was decorated with twinkling lights, and the scent of pine lingered in the air. But I could not shake the feeling of displacement, as if I were merely an unwelcomed guest, rather than the father I had once sacrificed so much to support. The dining room buzzed with laughter, remnants of a joyful gathering. Jake was surrounded by his colleagues, animatedly discussing some corporate success story, while I slipped into a corner, feeling like a ghost haunting the fringes of a family celebration. I recalled the countless hours I had toiled to ensure he had everything he needed: his education, his home, even that flashy car he drove like it was an extension of his status. A part of me had always felt proud, ghostly pride perhaps, but more often a growing resentment that this was the thanks I received in return for years of graft and dedication. "Dad, I didn't expect you to come." Jake's offhand comment cut through the clamor, sharp as a knife. His voice, dismissive and casual, reverberated in my mind. Did he really not think I had other commitments? The sting of his words sunk deep, a reminder of the distance that had widened between us, that relentless gulf fueled by his ungratefulness. The room fell silent for a moment, and I felt the weight of the world shift upon my shoulders. In that instant, I could see clearly how unwelcome I had become in my own son's life. I mumbled something equally trivial in response, attempting to brush off the comment, but inside, fury churned, and my hands clenched at my sides, digging into my palms as I fought back the urge to shout. The laughter continued around me, and I could feel my heart racing, the heat creeping up my neck. I knew then I had to leave. As the facade of family filled with merriment swirled around me, I felt more isolated than I had in years. Once outside, the cold air hit me with a jolt, washing away the false warmth of the gathering. I walked to my car, each step heavy with realization. How many times had I put him first, only to find myself relegated to the role of a mere observer in his life? I had sacrificed not just my time, but pieces of myself, my dreams, my aspirations. And for what? A flippant remark that summed up a lifetime of ungratefulness? The drive home was a blur. My mind raced through every moment. The overtimes I took just to afford the brands he wanted. The new things I withheld from myself to make sure he had the best. I had built him up, only to be cast aside when my scaffolding no longer suited his needs. As the headlights reflected off the quiet streets, I imagined a life hopeful, unshackled from this invisible burden. The streets passed by in a dizzying array of lights and shadows, blending together like the blurred narrative of my own life. I parked in my driveway, the weight of my own decisions pressing heavily on my chest. Sitting in the dim glow of my old home, I began to assess my situation. The house I had poured heart and soul into, was it still mine? Or had it become merely a relic of who I once was? A sanctuary turned prison, where the echoes of my son's untamed ambition and ignorance mingled with the memories of happier days. I envisioned living hopeful from the strings binding me to Jake, a life where I could finally indulge in the quieter pleasures I had neglected while being a provider. I could see myself tackling projects I had set aside, finishing that woodworking project in the garage, maybe painting my long overdue garden shed, or even traveling to places I had only dreamed of. That Christmas, the hopeful spark of rebellion began to flicker inside me. I could feel it, a burgeoning sense of freedom waiting to be unleashed. I began to think about how unsustainable my current situation was, the wear and tear of my unappreciated contributions weighing down on me like an anchor. My mind raced through my memories, reliving each sacrifice, each late night spent worrying over bills and what was left unpaid, wondering when Jake would appreciate the foundation I laid for him, only to find myself instead at the edge of disillusionment. As I sat there, I began to understand that the greatest gift I could give myself was to sever the ties of obligation. I no longer had to be the provider, the ever-present father who was taken for granted. It was time to take my life back. The thought rolled over me like a wave, pushing away the fear of the unknown and replacing it with a sense of purpose. What could I do? Where would I start? I shifted in my seat, fueled by an energetic resolve. As the cold night surrounded me, I realized I could finally step into a realm where my desires mattered. With a firm grip on that thought, my mind transformed the fantasies of release into practical plans. Now I sought reclamation. I didn't have to remain tethered to Jake's expectations any longer. Moving forward, bending and breaking the chains that had bound me would not be a crime. It would be the act of a reclaimed man, ready to embrace life on my own terms. The chill of the night lingered as I sat there in the silence of my home, reflecting on the twists and turns of my life. Thoughts cascaded through my mind, with each one bringing memories to the forefront. Alone in my dimly lit living room, I let those memories wash over me as if they were the pieces of a life I had once cherished. My hands trembled slightly as I sipped my lukewarm coffee, the warmth contrasting against the coldness I felt outside. This was the moment I had to confront my past. I thought back to the nights spent in dimly lit construction sites, laboring so hard that my body ached and my hands were fraught with calluses. Jake, barely a teenager back then, would often wait up for me, his innocent eyes filled with admiration as he looked to me, the strong provider. I had built countless houses and apartments, shelters for others, but I had also built dreams for my own son, unknowing that one day those dreams would turn to dust under harsh realities and ungratefulness. There was a time when I remembered the fulfillment in those long hours. I'd come home, exhausted but proud, pushing through the fatigue to share a few moments with Jake before bedtime. He would ask me questions about my day, and I would regale him in stories of my triumphs and challenges. I saw the way his eyes lit up, how he hung on every word. Each anecdote was like rich soil, nurturing the young sprout of his ambition and dreams. I provided everything I believed a father should, sacrificing my own desires to ensure he had the best. But as he grew older, that admiration waned into something else, something distant. I remember sitting across the dinner table, watching him devour stories from the latest media or brag about his successes with friends, oblivious to the very foundations upon which his life was built. I began to fade into the background of his life, my sacrifices becoming mere footnotes to his grandeur. Those early days of connection slipping further and further away. Jake's college years came with an avalanche of expenses, and I took pride in playing a significant role in financing his education. I found myself working grueling hours, often accepting jobs that drained not just my body, but my spirit. I remember staring at the ceiling late at night, wondering if it would all be worth it. I sacrificed vacations, missed big family gatherings, and even put off home repairs. There was always another expense creeping into my budget, always another bill to pay. I told myself it was for Jake's future, and that, hopeful, kept me going. But particularly vivid memories were those moments when I watched him studiously absorb every lesson, every thrill of success, while I felt like a ghost in the room, living vicariously through his triumphs. Graduation day brought the bittersweet culmination of my efforts, looking at his cap and gown, feeling a swell of pride and emptiness all at once. He could not see the sacrifices hidden in the shadows of celebration. All he saw was opportunity forged by his own prowess, as if I had played no role in shaping his life. Once he started working, the distance only grew. Jake had everything ahead of him: ambition, charm, and a corporate job that snatched him away into a world of circles I couldn't penetrate. As he thrived, I felt the ground beneath us shift. A chasm formed between us, filled with his insatiable hunger for recognition bred from a sense of entitlement. In my moments of solitude, resentment accumulated like ballast weighing me down. Each dismissal, every thankless interaction sharpened the edges of my disappointment. Memories swirled together, a tapestry woven with threads of care, now marred by the fabric of his ingratitude. I gripped the coffee mug tighter, feeling heat radiating against my palms as if to stave off the increasing chill from those recollections. And yet, amid this simmering bitterness, I felt a confident resolve crystallizing. I needed to reclaim my narrative. I should no longer be the one relegated to supporting roles in a story where my contributions were rendered invisible. The thought ignited an energetic flicker of determination inside me. It was time to push past the shadows and embrace my own desires. With that thought, my perspective shifted. Instead of lingering on the perceived injustices and neglect, I pictured the hopeful freedom I had let slip between my fingers. I recalled my own dreams before they got tangled in obligation, how I wanted to fix up my home, maybe travel to places I had always wondered about, or explore forgotten corners of my creative self. I had dreams once, those blueprints of hope layered like the very walls I had built for others. I could still lay down new foundations. Taking a deep breath, I let the memories transform. I envisioned a future where I put my needs first, one where I no longer hesitated to pursue my own happiness. I remembered how I used to enjoy woodworking and painting, skills set aside for too long, hidden behind walls of responsibilities and expectations. Now it was time to, hopefully, dust off those tools and dreams, to breathe new life into aspirations that had become buried under layers of sacrifice and dissatisfaction. The bitterness began to fade as I embraced the idea of happiness. This was not just about cutting ties with a wayward son. It was a personal renaissance. I would redefine who I was, reestablishing my worth on my own terms. The weight of obligation had started to lift, letting light seep through the cracks I once believed were sealed. I could feel my heart beat faster in anticipation of the independence that lay ahead, the prospect of a life where my worth would not be measured by someone else's expectations, but by my own aspirations and choices. As I sat there, a hopeful new story began to unfurl, a narrative steeped in determination, strategy, and empowerment. I envisioned each step with clarity, fueled by the wisdom of my past experiences. I would seize control over my life, crafting a future dictated by my desires rather than dissatisfaction. It felt exhilarating, electrifying even. I was ready to fight for my freedom, ready to reclaim not only my home, but also my identity, my joy, and my life. The sound of the morning sun filtering through the dusty window pulled me from my reverie. I had slept more soundly than I could remember in years. Stretching my back, I felt the tension of the night wash away, leaving a tingle of renewed energy. Today was different. I could sense it. This was the day when I would start to transform my frustrations into action. I uncovered a confident perspective, and that emboldened me to take decisive steps toward reclaiming my autonomy. As I brewed my morning coffee, I couldn't stop thinking about the letter I had received from the bank. Amid the stream of papers piled on my cluttered kitchen table, it stood out like a sad, glaring red flag. Foreclosure! Until then, I had felt the weight of financial chains, complacently accepting my duties as a provider without questioning if my support was being respected. This letter, however, slapped me awake, the kind of wake-up call that makes one confront hard truths. How did it come to this? I had spent years keeping the house afloat, pouring my earnings into it to ensure that it was a vessel of love and support for my family. But I realized now that I was the one keeping it aloft, and that was a burden I no longer had to bear alone, nor silently. As I sat at the kitchen table, coffee steaming in my hands, I decided that the pathway through the turmoil would become a calculated strategy, a plan. I would flip the narrative. I would take ownership of my choices for once and let Jake face the potentials of his own decisions. I felt the tight space around me start to unfurl with opportunities as I mapped out my plan. I grabbed a notepad and a pen, allowing the ink to flow as freely as my ideas. First, I needed to gather information about my mortgage. It dawned on me that I had skimmed through those documents like a man on a tight deadline, never truly absorbing what they implied or what powers I may yet hold beneath their legalese. I ventured into the living room where the untidy stack of papers awaited, feeling a small edge of adrenaline rush through my veins. I began to sift through the pile, familiarizing myself with every line and clause in the mortgage agreement. Each page I turned provided clarity, a reminder wrapped in the complex jargon of finance and real estate. I realized there were clauses and rights I had overlooked, rights that could empower me as the homeowner, not merely a debtor. Each discovery felt like unearthed treasure, every stipulation becoming an arrow in my quiver. The more I dissected the agreement, the more confident I felt. I made a list of all the rights I had as a homeowner, the protection against unfair foreclosure, the timeline of payments, the possibilities for negotiation. This was the foundation of my new strategy. I resolved to gather and document every ounce of evidence that proved my rightful ownership and my contributions to this home. This was not merely a house. It was a tribute to my sacrifices, my labor, my efforts. It was blood, sweat, and tears. Jake may see it as something to simply inherit without regard, but I would show him it was, indeed, a legacy forged through years of hard work. I knew I needed more than just my own understanding. I had skills to leverage. I reached out to my former colleague, Marcus, a seasoned real estate lawyer who had once been a great mentor in my construction career. He always explained the legalities of property ownership with a down-to-earth demeanor that made complex issues seem almost approachable. I dialed his number with nervous excitement, knowing that I needed a confident, firm ally in this uprising against the ingrained disrespect I'd faced. "Michael, it's been ages," Marcus answered, his voice imbued with warmth and familiarity. I wasted no time explaining the predicament.
I need your help, Marcus. I'm in a tough spot with my mortgage, and I'd like to get your insight into some of the legalities before things escalate. Of course, I can help with that, he replied, his tone shifting to a professional urgency. Let's meet up and go over everything. You know what they say, knowledge is power. Meeting him later that week in a quaint coffee shop felt like reclaiming a piece of the life I once valued so greatly. Communicating with someone who understood the complexities of both construction and finance. Someone who could help me navigate this path forward. The cafe bustled with patrons, cups clinking against saucers as I waited for Marcus, anxiety mixed with anticipation filling my gut. When he arrived, his smile felt like a refresher from the outside world. After pleasantries, I laid out my situation, outlining the frustration and resentment I had faced and how the impending foreclosure had opened my eyes. He listened intently, nodding as I unfolded my plan. "You have every right to stand your ground," Marcus said, sipping his coffee thoughtfully. "And from what you've told me, I see potential leverage. We can gather evidence showing your contributions to the home value, document Jake's lack of appreciation, and present your case against any unfair claims the bank might have. And most importantly, you cannot foreclose without negotiating. You're not just some passive player in this, you can take action." His words, confident, emboldened me, fanning the energetic flames of my resolve even higher. We started discussing strategies, timelines, and prepared documents meant to outline the value of the work I had done through the years, including renovations, new builds, and the like. Each bullet point became a rallying cry in my quest for empowerment, a checklist that would culminate in my breakthrough. As I continued to outline our plan, I envisioned the hopeful future I was reclaiming for myself. Every detail took shape like fresh blueprints in my mind. Woodworking projects I would tackle, the garden I would cultivate, the adventures I would take. The warm light of the cafe suddenly transformed in my eyes, illuminating the possibilities ahead, like foreshadowing a vibrant dawn after years of dull twilight. Finally, Marcus leaned back in his chair, his happy smile wide. "You've got this, Michael. But remember, this isn't just business, it's personal. You're not just fighting for a house, you're fighting for acknowledgement, respect, and your freedom." And at that moment, I understood that this was more than a calculation. It was personal pride on the line. I pledged to honor the sacrifices I had made and transform them into direction and determination. I had momentum, resources, and, most importantly, a vision. As Marcus and I concluded our meeting and shared another cup of coffee, I felt the chains that had bound me to disappointment and silence begin to loosen. With each step of this plan, I felt a sense of clarity and resolution energizing my spirit. I was ready to carve out a new life, one built on strength, integrity, and a renewed sense of self. The scripts of my life were mine to write. All that remained was to shape my future, reclaim my narrative, and take the steps that would lead me toward a hopeful new beginning. The time had come for action. I would seize my independence and transform my story into one of empowerment and self-defined success. With the echoes of my conversation with Marcus still buzzing in my mind, I returned home filled with a sense of purpose and exhilaration. The cluttered kitchen table now resembled a serious war room, adorned with documents, lists, and scattered notepads that together formed the groundwork of my strategy. I felt confident, like a builder surveying the foundation of a magnificent structure, ready to lay brick upon brick. As I filled in the gaps in my plan, I turned my attention to a specific task, a detailed examination of the mortgage contract I had brushed aside too many times before. I spread the documents across the table, the fluorescent kitchen lights illuminating the text like spotlights on a stage. Each legal term began to take form in my understanding, revealing clues that previously eluded me. I began by highlighting relevant sections that addressed homeowners' rights and obligations. I scrutinized clauses that spoke of foreclosure processes, rights to dispute unfair actions, and timelines that the bank was required to follow. I learned about grace periods, the importance of financial statements, and rights to renegotiate terms, all confident tools I could wield to assert my place in this battle. Hours melted away as I worked diligently to connect every piece of information. With a stack of highlighted papers by my side, I turned to gather evidence of my contributions to the property's value. Each renovation I had completed, each weekend spent fixing, painting, and improving the space, I needed to document it all. I opened the garage, revealing dusty tools that held memories of creating, forging, and sculpting my environment. I felt a melancholy stab of nostalgia, remembering how those moments had once been joyous undertakings, far removed from the burden now associated with them. I started gathering receipts, old photos, and notes on the upgrades I had completed over the years. The deck I had built, the appliances I'd replaced, the garden I had cultivated, each one a testament to my labor and a reflection of my love for my family. Lost in my memories, I began to see the value of my labor translated into hard evidence. This house was not merely a financial transaction, but a canvas of my life's work. The following days turned into a whirlwind of organization. I transformed my chaos into a systematic layout, sorting through every document with military precision. I meticulously crafted a timeline that traced back to when I first purchased the house, detailing every modification and the sacrifices made to pay for it. There was power in this chronological narrative. Each addition wasn't just an improvement, it was a piece of me left behind in those walls. As I worked, I sent Marcus updates regarding my progress. His enthusiasm nourished my momentum. This is what I wanted to see. This preparation is vital. It demonstrates not just your fiscal commitment, but your emotional investment in that home. You are not just facing a bank, but preparing for this battle as a father, a man who has given so much and deserves to be recognized for it, he hopefully encouraged me. Feeling affirmed, I dove deeper into research surrounding the foreclosure process. Legal websites became my allies, and the more I read, the more I realized how many homeowners, like me, had fallen victim to oversight, ignorance, or unabashed entitlement from banks. The statistics were staggering. Countless families were losing their homes due to loopholes and lack of awareness. In those quiet moments, as I pored over article after article, I began to feel not only the weight of my own obligations, but also a sense of sad camaraderie for those who face similar battles. I recognized that many had hopeful triumphed against the odds, reclaiming their dignity by standing firm and fighting for what was theirs. The day finally arrived when I felt confident, prepared to confront the bank. I gathered a folder filled with my findings, timelines, evidence of contributions, and supporting documents that displayed my unwavering commitment to my home. I dressed in a clean but simple outfit, feeling the anxiety churn inside me, but I pushed it aside, reminding myself of my purpose. I wasn't merely a name in a crowd. I was Michael, a devoted father who had sacrificed much and was ready to reclaim what was rightfully his. At the bank, the lobby was bright and sterile, contrasting sharply with the storm within me. A receptionist greeted me, and I knew I had to take a deep breath, ground myself. "I have an appointment," I said, injecting confidence into my voice. As I settled into the waiting area, my heart raced, pounding like a drum. The minutes dragged by, and with each tick of the clock, I channeled the energy of determination that had driven my journey thus far. I envisioned the weight of the disappointments shedding with every heartbeat until it dissolved into something resembling clarity. When finally ushered into a stark office, I sat across from a bank representative whose calm demeanor clashed with the storm of emotions brewing inside me. After the formalities, I took a moment to collect my thoughts. "I'm here to discuss my mortgage and the recent foreclosure notice," I began, laying the groundwork for a discussion that would unfold in my favor. I presented my evidence methodically, each point robust with documentation and emotion as I regarded that representative. I explained my sacrifices, the memories forged within the walls of that house, and how I had been the one to sustain it, improve it, and shape its essence. I could see the representative veneer of a corporate soldier slowly chip away, giving way to the reality of my claims. As I spoke, I felt powerful in my vulnerability. I could see the gears turning in their head as they began to comprehend the depth of my attachment to this place, understanding that I was not simply fighting for a financial record, but for a memory, something that encapsulated years of love and sacrifice. Soon, I could sense the atmosphere in the room shift. I outlined my rights, citing the clauses I had studied, while presenting my timeline of contributions. I could see the realization dawning on the bank representative. They were not dealing with a passive client anymore. My aggressive resolve was palpable, and I was ready to fight not just for myself, but for the memories that lived within every corner of that house. After what felt like an eternity of discussion, I left the office, my heart racing with both adrenaline and hope. I had stepped into that room as a father ready to reclaim his home and emerged with an unshakable conviction that the path I had undertaken was bound to reshape my future. The plan I had initiated was no longer just a collection of actions. It had become a crusade toward reclaiming power and self-worth. I had taken my first official stand for respect, ownership, and dignity. This was more than just a battle against foreclosure. I was rewriting the narrative of my life, challenging the shame of years, and replacing it with the pride of a man who was not afraid to reclaim his story. The days following my heartfelt discussion with Jake unfolded with a blend of hopeful and cautious optimism. The atmosphere in the house felt different. It was as if the air had become charged with the energy of unspoken truths and the promise of deeper connection. Jake's willingness to acknowledge my sacrifices marked the beginning of a transformative period in our relationship, and I was determined to nurture this fragile new understanding. As I moved forward, my attention turned to the ongoing battle with the bank. I had made my stand, asserting my rights, but the journey was far from over. I reached out to Marcus for guidance, who consistently reinforced the importance of visibility in this conflict. "You need them to see the human side of this story, Michael," he urged. "Show them how your life's work intertwines with that home." With his advice echoing in my mind, I dedicated myself to preparing thoroughly for my next meeting with the bank. I reevaluated my documentation, compiling timelines of my contributions alongside the emotional weight that accompanied each renovation and improvement I had made to the home. I transformed the notion of my sacrifices into a compelling narrative, ready to share the real implications behind the numbers. On the day of the meeting, as I walked into the bank, the familiar mix of anxiety and determination coursed through me. Sitting across from the representative who had initially met my story with skepticism, I resolved to present not just paperwork, but the heartfelt reality of my life. "I appreciate you seeing me again," I started, establishing a tone of respect. As I reviewed my case, I emphasized the depth of my connection to the house, not merely as an asset, but as a vessel of memories and investments. I shared my timeline, highlighting not only the repairs and renovations, but also the emotional labor I had poured into creating a home for my family. For every anecdote I shared, I felt a calm shift within the room. The representative began to reflect a genuine interest, their body language gradually opening as I painted a vivid picture of my life. The conversation transformed as I articulated how I was not just fighting for a financial resolution, but also for serious acknowledgement of a legacy built on love and sacrifice. After an extended dialogue, the representative acknowledged the weight of my testimony. They agreed to forward my case to a higher authority for consideration. Though it wasn't a victory, it felt like a meaningful step toward achieving justice for my years of effort. Upon returning home, I noticed the warmth of the newfound connection with Jake permeating our space. He sensed the shift in my mood and asked, "How did it go?" "They're beginning to listen," I replied, allowing a happy smile to break across my face.
It feels like they're starting to understand. "That's great, Dad. I'm behind you every step of the way," he responded with sincerity. And for the first time, I felt like he genuinely understood the magnitude of what I was fighting for. This was no longer just an abstract concern, but a family matter. With each passing day, our conversations about the house segmented into deeper dialogues about our lives, values, and what family meant. We shared lunches and dinners with an openness that felt fresh and meaningful. The past began to dissipate like morning mist as we leaned more into the truth we had uncovered. Breaking old patterns required patience, but each interaction strengthened the bonds between us. I embraced my role not just as a father, but as an integral piece of our family's narrative. In this journey, Jake began to see me not just as the provider, but as a man confronting challenges and reclaiming his dignity. I discovered that reclaiming my home meant far more than the physical structure. It was about rebuilding our relationship and fostering respect as a cornerstone of our family. I embraced the new interactions with hopeful that we could navigate this journey of renewal together. As I turned to face the horizon of challenges ahead, I realized the story I was rewriting extended beyond property rights. It was a confident manifesto of resilience and self-worth. Empowered by the connections I was forging, I was ready to confront whatever came next, not just for myself, but for the family I cherished and the legacy I was determined to preserve. This was not merely a fight for a house. It was a fight for love, respect, and a future built on recognition and understanding.